A big topic here, and we'll be looking at this again next week, I believe, is the state of the forests in northern Minnesota and especially northern Wisconsin as well. Massive, massive areas of property with a huge biodiversity here, but certainly under threats, not just from the wildfires that we've seen currently going on, the ones from a few weeks ago as well, but from invasive species as well. So we begin today with a discussion about the health of forests across Wisconsin. So we're joined now by Paul Cigan, who's the forest health specialist with the Wisconsin DNR. Paul, thanks for taking some time today.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Sure. You've got, I know, a discussion scheduled, a public discussion scheduled for June 30th in Ashland about invasive insects and diseases with the forests of northern Wisconsin. What is it exactly that you pay the most attention to tracking these threats to the health of our forests?
Yeah, we can really break down the threats to Wisconsin forests in two different groups. Invasive species, which include invasive insect pests, but also diseases. And then we have what we would say maybe cyclic native pests and diseases. So those insects that are on cycles that are somewhat triggered by environmental conditions such as drought or high temperatures in the summer. Or in the case of diseases, often we see if we get wet periods like we had around in northern Wisconsin and much of Wisconsin between about 2010 and 2020, we have a higher incidence of various tree diseases. And so when we break those apart, what we tend to see is that every year is a little bit different, but there are a number of persistent pests and diseases that we keep an eye out for every year that are either building in population or are likely to cycle back through. And I'll give you an example here. One of the things that we're keeping a close eye on in northern Wisconsin, and we've really been looking at it for years now in the state, is the expanded mortality and infestation from a non-native insect pest called the emerald ash borer. Many people have heard of it. Probably people have dealt with it on their own property. Emerald ash borer is what's considered the most impacting insect pest that's arrived in North America since back in about 2002. And since it has killed millions of trees, both in Wisconsin and well beyond the borders in much of the U.S. So that is a pest that every year we're keeping tabs on in terms of its arrival and detection into new municipalities across the state. We've had detections in all 72 counties, but we are still tracking at the more fine level of a municipality, township, or a city to determine the presence of it and where we might have suitable sites to release biocontrol wasps to fight EAB. There's some other ones we can think about, like oak wilt. Oak wilt is instead a disease that kills oak trees, and it spreads when we move firewood that's infected with oak wilt, or when we move firewood logs, which is a very typical scenario in northern Wisconsin, where people burn firewood for heating and outdoor boilers. When they move that wood and when that wood arrives to a new location where oak wilt isn't present, we often see the detection of new satellite infections of this disease. And so while it moves in some senses slower than EAB, and while it kills fewer trees overall than EAB, it's something we're still tracking year by year.
Interesting. And, getting back to emerald ash borer, we've seen a lot of that, over the years where it's don't transport firewood, you don't be careful of all that. And certainly we've seen a lot of attempts to mitigate. We've seen a lot of trees cut down, ash trees cut down, but we've seen a lot that have been attempted to be saved as well. It's interesting that after so much time, the threat of that is still something that's very serious. I mean, how serious is that threat currently versus even, say, 10 years ago? Are we getting a handle on it or not?
EAB, again, it is a very difficult insect to control, and there's a few reasons for that. The first is that it's easy to transport EAB, just like many of these other insect and disease pests, in firewood. And people love to transport firewood for camping, for home use, and it makes sense. It's often cheaper to get a local source and then move it. The problem is that it harbors a lot of these issues. EAB is one of the fundamental ones that we're concerned about. In addition, EAB as an insect is a strong flyer. It can fly perhaps up to 6 miles per year on its own. So in addition to human-assisted spread, it can also spread on its own quite well. We haven't really gotten a big handle on EAB because of how widespread it's become through human-assisted spread, and then it's on its own accord flying around. And so we have continued to see an increasing trend in ash mortality across Wisconsin. EAB first detected in Wisconsin in 2008. Fast forward to 2024, and we've hit the 72nd county with EAB. That's all 72 counties in the state with a positive EAB detection, just under 20 years. And so the thing has moved across the state effectively. Quarantines were implemented, and it slowed it down, but it wasn't enough to really stop it. We have a lot of effective controls when we're talking about individual yard trees that can be employed, such as insecticide injections on trees. On a larger forest scale, we have options of silvicultural or harvesting types of measures that can be done to reduce the impact. But the truth is, EAB has continued to spread, and it will continue to impact much of the forest in northern Wisconsin, which is much comprised of a type of species that's highly susceptible to emerald ash borer black ash and has a lot of both ecological and cultural value. But there are some bright spots in this story. While we haven't been able to really stop the spread of EAB, we have been involved with the USDA, our department, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, in a partnership where we have been releasing stingless wasps that evolved and came from Northeast Asia, the same area where EAB evolved. And these small wasps are involved in parasitizing the small larvae or grubs of EAB while they're either in an egg form on the bark or underneath the bark. And the release of these wasps every summer since 2011 has allowed us to establish some of these 3 species in Wisconsin. And while they won't stop the trees from being killed by EAB as that first wave of infestation arrives to a new ash forest, what we do see happening is that areas with long infestation down near Waukesha County in Milwaukee area in the southeast are starting to show signs that the ash that is regrowing is recovering. The trees sometimes have infestation on them from EAB, and they are surviving. Other trees aren't showing any infestation at all. So what we're seeing with this process of releasing these parasitoids is it may allow for the long-term persistence of young ash on the landscape to grow and play a role like the older ash forest had, maybe not as prevalent, maybe not as dense, but to some extent still provide for native ash tree species to persist on the landscape. Meanwhile, it's worth noting that Wisconsin DNR, in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, is working on a resistant breeding program to determine where we may have some resistance in the ash tree populations and select those individuals that are displaying a higher tolerance or resistance to either the infestation or the death from emerald ash borer in those specific trees, collect their seed, cross them with other resistant varieties, and see if we can eventually develop a tree that can resist EAB in the long run. So those are just a couple of the things we've been at.
All right. Yeah, interesting to see the various approaches and sort of the, I guess, biotechnological approaches here too to stopping it. All right. Well, thanks for the time. Again, a public discussion that you have scheduled June 30th in Ashland, Wisconsin, about invasive insects and diseases as we talk about keeping the forests across northern Wisconsin vibrant. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
All right. That's Paul Cigan of the Wisconsin DNR